Evil isn't chaos. It's organized, structured, and far more intelligent than you've been told. From the moment you learned to speak, the world fed you stories that dressed darkness in clumsy metaphors and cartoonish masks, horns, hooves, red skin. These were distractions. They made sure you laughed at the idea of demons so you'd never dare take the reality seriously. But in the oldest traditions, the unseen world was not a fairy tale. It was a system, a network, a hierarchy with order, names, sigils, and intent. A world not ruled by madness, but by law, ancient, occult, and largely misunderstood. You were never meant to look deeper, because if you did, you'd find something terrifying. Not just that demons exist, but that they operate by rules. That power is accessibly not randomly, but through ritual agreement and sacrifice. And once you understand their language, you'll never see this world or your place in it the same way again. If you believe the demonic realm is chaotic, you're already under its spell. The real power in demonology doesn't lie in fire, screams, or shadow, it lies in its order. Ancient grimoires, some locked away for centuries and others paraded in plain sight, speak not of disorganized evil, but of empires. There are kings, princes, dukes, marezich, with legions under their command, each bound by duties, domains, and an internal code of conduct. This isn't superstition, it's structure. And the deeper you look, the more it resembles our own world, politics, military hierarchies, financial systems. Perhaps ours was modeled on theirs, or perhaps theirs is a mirror of ours, but either way, the resemblance is not accidental. The Ars Goetia, a foundational text in the Lesser Key of Solomon, doesn't describe demons as monsters, but as entities of intelligence and purpose. Each one governs certain abilities: manipulation, influence, knowledge, transformation. Their forms are symbolic, their seals precise, and their presence only accessible when summoned through deliberate ritual. They do not randomly invade, they respond. These aren't reckless spirits. These are bureaucrats of the unseen, obeying a hierarchy so refined that even summoners must know the proper rank, the correct hour, and the right offerings to gain audience. Every name, every title, every sigil is a key. The mistake we've made is assuming demons operate in madness when in truth they operate in law. Even their obedience has limits, each entity bound by cosmic structure. Some say divine decree, others say self-governing order. And this order is governed not by morality but by exchange. You do not pray to a demon, you negotiate, and what they offer is not abstract. Power, influence, knowledge, even transformation. But it's not free. The cost depends on what you're willing to give and how well you understand the language of the deal. And that's the part that unsettles most people, because the existence of a demonic structure means the system works, that these entities are consistent, predictable, accessible. That's a kind of truth people aren't ready for. Not because it's evil, but because it reveals something uncomfortable. Maybe the structure of our own world is based on the same logic: power in exchange for sacrifice, loyalty in exchange for privilege, silence in exchange for survival. Look around you. Hierarchies aren't just spiritual. They're societal, institutional, economic, and perhaps that's why demonology is so quickly dismissed, because it strikes too close to home. This unseen world isn't a haunted house. It's a hidden government, one whose emissaries do not break into our world without invitation. They require it through symbol, through intention, through ritual. And while most will never dare step into that realm, those who do often find that the system is far more organized than our own. But that organization comes with risk, because to open that door is to enter a system that plays by rules, just not the ones you've been taught. Some of what we've uncovered here is too sensitive for this platform. Join Insight's Academia free newsletter for deeper material and receive a free copy of the Kybalion while it lasts. Links in the description. Because once you understand that there is structure behind what you've been told is chaos, the next question isn't whether demons exist, it's how they're accessed. And that brings us to the language they respond to, not words but symbols. The gateway to communication with the infernal isn't conversation, it's the sigil. And those who know how to use them aren't summoning fantasy. They're dialing into a spiritual frequency older than religion and more precise than most modern technology. To understand the hierarchy is to know who you're speaking to, but to use their language is to get them to answer. They told you symbols were harmless, just drawings, marks, or designs passed down through superstition. But anyone who studied the occult knows that symbols are not just art, they're circuitry. See. Gills in particular are not random. They're spiritual technology, encoded diagrams believed to act as metaphysical addresses. They are designed to connect the physical realm with specific intelligences from the unseen. In demonology, a sigil is not simply a representation. It is an invocation, a portal, a magnetic pull for an entity whose presence would otherwise remain out of reach. And like any technology, it requires understanding, intention, and correct execution. Otherwise, the circuit remains incomplete or worse. It backfires. Every major demon has a sigil. These aren't just aesthetic markings, but precise constructs often found in grimoires such as the Lemagedon or the Grand Grimoire. Each curve, angle, and intersection is believed to hold energetic meaning. Much like how a language conveys thought through arrangement, the magician doesn't just draw the sigil. They charge it, project intent into it, and use it as a bridge between mind and spirit. It is a medium for focus, for access, for control, not because the demon needs the sigil, but because the practitioner does. It sharpens the mind, it narrows the vibration, it opens the gate. To the untrained eye, it might seem foolish to believe a drawing on paper could summon a force from beyond, but consider this. We use passwords to unlock bank accounts, QR codes to activate menus, logos to trigger brand loyalty. We already live in a world where symbols control behavior. The occult simply takes this principle to its rawest level. In this paradigm, a sigil is the login to a deeper layer of reality. It is a request sent to an entity with the power to respond. Granted, the proper terms are met. There is nothing fantastical about this if you understand systems, symbols, and will, but here's where it gets more unsettling. The use of sigils isn't limited to candle-lit rituals and ancient tomes. Modern institutions understand symbolic control far better than most magicians. Corporate logos, national emblems, military flags, they all function as charged sigils. You pledge allegiance to flags. You buy based on logos. You fear or trust based on uniforms. Every one of these symbols conditions your mind to associate emotion with authority, loyalty with branding, and identity with external design. This isn't coincidence. It's archetypal programming. Occultists might draw sigils on parchment, but corporations etch them into consciousness. What separates a McDonald's logo from the seal of Astaroth is not belief but intent. One is meant to influence the subconscious toward consumer action, the other toward metaphysical interaction. But the principle is the same. Symbol is a vessel of control, and that's the uncomfortable truth most ignore, not because they don't see the symbols, but because they've been trained to overlook their purpose. And in doing so, they surrender their consent without ever realizing it. In demonology, to draw a sigil is to initiate a relationship. It's the spiritual equivalent of knocking on a locked door and waiting to be acknowledged. But to knock without understanding who you're calling or why is dangerous, because not all doors should be opened casually, and not all entities respond with kindness. The sigil is not the danger, the ignorance is. That's why in traditional practice, the name and rank of the spirit must be known. The correct ritual tools must be prepared. The space must be consecrated. The practitioner must be mentally and emotionally prepared, not with fear, but with focus. Because here's the secret. It isn't the paper that carries the power, it's the will. The sigil merely gives it direction. The intent sharpened through ritual and repetition is what sends the signal. The belief isn't blind, it's directional. And once the connection is made, the interaction becomes transactional. The next question becomes, what are you offering in return? Because in this system, no request goes unpaid. The sigil opens the door, but the offering is what allows you to step through. And in the darker corners of demonology, that offering has always been the same. Your energy, your focus, your sacrifice, and sometimes your blood. Power always demands a price. In the unseen world, blood is the oldest currency known to spirit. It's not superstition, it's not metaphor. Blood has been used in spiritual rituals across nearly every culture in nearly every era for one simple reason, because it holds life. It is the carrier of vitality, will, and essence. It flows not just through the body, but through the core of ritual itself. In demonology, blood is not simply a symbol of seriousness. It is a seal, a bond, a contract written in the language all entities understand: sacrifice. When someone offers blood in a ritual context, they aren't just making a gesture. They are giving something living, something that costs. The act of drawing blue Dina drop is the magician's way of saying this matters. It shows intent, not in words, but in essence. That's why in many tradi. Chanel writes, blood is offered at the moment of invocation or pact making. It binds the will of the practitioner to the request, not because demons feed on blood like some horror movie creature, but because blood marks commitment. It's irreversible. It cannot be faked. And in this system, sincerity matters more than fear. This is why blood is central not only in demonology, but across spiritual frameworks. From ancient animal sacrifices in temples to Christian narratives of crucifixion, the blood is always there, always flowing, always significant. Even modern medical rituals like blood tests, donations, transfusion seco, the same truth that blood is sacred, powerful, and deeply symbolic. The occult simply refuses to pretend otherwise. But here's what most won't tell you. Blood isn't always literal. In many modern practices, blood is a stand-in for life energy, sleep deprivation, intense focus, fasting, even sexual energy. All of these are offerings. The common thread is sacrifice. It must cost something. The pact must be felt. Whether it's your time, your energy, your comfort, or your sanity, the system responds when you offer something of value. And blood, being the most literal expression of life force, is simply the most potent. In traditional grimoires, blood was often used to inscribe sigils or names onto parchment or skin. It was mixed with ink, anointed on candles, smeared across altars. Some traditions used animal blood, others used the practitioner's own. It wasn't for theatrics, it was for resonance. To connect the spiritual with the physical through a substance that carried identity, DNA, and power, the magician was saying, "This is mine, this is me, I offer it willingly." And that act of giving something that cannot be returned changed the ritual from symbolic to binding. We don't like to talk about blood anymore. It's taboo, dirty, univalized. But the systems that govern us still demand sacrifice only. Now it's hidden under modern names. You bleed for your job metaphorically. Every day you sacrifice your time, your mental health, your relationships to climb the ladders society says matter. The system no longer asks for blood with a knife. It asks for your life force over decades. You burn out, you break down, and you wonder why it feels like you're being drained. Because you are. The offerings never stopped, only the rituals changed. Blood has always marked a transition from one state to another, from one loyalty to another. In demonology, it is the moment a pact goes from intention to consequence. It marks the line between curiosity and commitment, and once it's given, something always answers. Because in the unseen world, nothing listens to whispers, but everything listens to blood. Yet blood alone is not enough. It opens the door, yes, but the deal still needs to be made. The pact still needs to be written. And like any contract, the terms must be clear. Because once agreed upon, what follows is no longer metaphor. It is law, and that's where we're going next. The world of demonic contracts, where every word matters and every choice has weight. There's a reason pacts with demons are never portrayed as vague. They're not accidents. They're not random curses or spontaneous hauntings. They are agreements specific, structured, and deliberate. The devil doesn't trick people into deals. People walk into them with their eyes wide shut. And the truth is, the demonic world isn't interested in chaos. It thrives on order. That's the part most people miss. These entities operate on law, spiritual law, ritual law, consent-based law. And in this system, ignorance is not innocence, it's permission. Every pact follows the same logic. Request, offering, agreement, consequence. It is not unlike the contracts we sign every day. We're just more afraid of the ones written in blood than the ones written in ink. But make no mistake, both are binding. In historical cases, pacts were made for knowledge, for love, for power, for revenge. People didn't reach out to demons because they were bored. They did it because they were desperate, because they felt cornered, because the systems around them offered no real options, no real power, and so they turned to the ones that promised to answer. And those entities answered, but always on their own terms. In the infamous case of Faust, the scholar seeks ultimate knowledge and forms a pact with Mephistopheles, offering his soul in exchange. It's a story that's echoed across centuries, not because it's rare, but because it reveals something deeper. That people will trade what they don't fully understand for what they think they need, and the demonic realm has no problem accepting that deal. Because in that world, your signature isn't just your name. It's your intention, your desperation, your focus, and sometimes your ignorance. Pacts can be verbal, written, symbolic, even energetic. It's not always about candles and chants. Sometimes it's about alignment. If your actions, emotion, and desires sync up with what an entity offers, the connection forms often unconsciously. And this is where it gets dangerous. Because in the spiritual world, what you feed with your energy becomes real. If you obsess over vengeance, you attract entities that thrive on it. If you crave control, you invite the ones who specialize in manipulation. And if you act on those impulses repeatedly, you're not just entertaining a thought, you're entering a contract. The fine print isn't hidden, it's just rarely read. That's what makes pacts so potent. They reveal that you always had the power to choose. No demon forces you to sign. No force from the infernal world compels obedience. The demon simply offers. You accept or you don't, but once the pact is made, it holds. And like any agreement, the cost may not be immediate, but it always arrives. What's rarely understood is that the demonic pact is not inherently evil. it's transactional. It's about precision, about knowing what you're willing to give in order to get what you want. In that sense, it's no different than a mortgage, a career contract, or a non-disclosure agreement. You offer your time, your energy, your freedom, sometimes your silence in exchange for something someone else can provide. The system we live in is built on the same framework. The only difference is that in demonology, the consequences are more obvious, more symbolic, and more feared. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe we're more scared of facing the price in ritual than we are of facing it in real life. Because in ritual, we know we're agreeing. In the everyday world, we pretend we're not. We pretend the job doesn't own us, that the debt doesn't define us, that the habits we repeat daily aren't binding us to outcomes we didn't consciously choose. But everything you agree to spiritually or materialize has a cost. The question is whether you know what that cost is and whether you're still willing to pay it once you do. This is why so many who study the occult eventually find themselves reevaluating not just their rituals, but their entire lives. They realize they've been making pacts all along with corporations, with belief systems, with institutions that promised safety and delivered servitude. Demonology just exposes the structure. It doesn't invent it. And once you've seen the logic behind the infernal, you start to see it everywhere. In the contracts you sign, in the apps you download. In the moments you trade freedom for comfort. Every pact is a choice. Every choice is a thread in a larger web. And once you understand the rules, you can stop pretending you don't see the price tags. But it doesn't stop with the deal. Because behind every pact, behind every offering and invocation, there's a framework of belief that justifies it. A mirror of morality that doesn't operate on good or evil, but on function. And once you look into that mirror, you'll realize the world of demons may not be as foreign as it seems. In fact, it might just be a reflection of something we all carry inside. The problem with our understanding of demons is that we've been taught to see them through a lens crafted by institutions that fear dissent. We're told they represent evil, chaotic, irrational, dangerous forces that exist solely to corrupt and destroy. But if you strip away the religious fear-mongering, what you'll find is something far more unsettling. Demons aren't mindless agents of destruction. They are expressions of will, of forbidden knowledge, of raw, unapologetic autonomy. In the realm of demonology, morality is not erased. It's inverted, and that inversion isn't a mockery of good. It's a challenge to the system that defined it. In many occult traditions, especially those influenced by the left-hand path, demons aren't evil. They're archetypes of power. They represent aspects of the self that have been demonized by culture. Independence, lust, ambition, rebellion, transformation. These traits aren't inherently harmful, but they are dangerous to control systems because once a person begins to embody those traits consciously, they stop being obedient. They stop asking for permission, and nothing terrifies a system more than someone who can't be tamed. Take Lucifer, for example, no the cartoon devil with horns and pitchforks, but the archetype of the Lightbringer, the one who defied authority in pursuit of knowledge, the one who questioned the imposed order and paid the price. Whether you take the myth literally or metaphorically, the message is clear. Rebellion is punished, not because it's wrong, but because it threatens the foundation of hierarchical control. And that's the essence of the inverted moral code. It says what you've been told is wicked may actually be your path to liberation. This doesn't mean all demonic figures are benevolent, nor that every form of rebellion is righteous. But it does mean the lines aren't where we thought they were. The systems that defined good and evil were not neutral. They were built to reward submission and punish sovereignty. And when you start to see that, everything begins to shift. You start to question who benefits from your obedience, who profits from your shame, who gains when you label your desires as sinful, your power as dangerous, your questions as disrespect. In demonology, the entities you summon don't care about your guilt. They care about your intent, your clarity, your will. They are indifferent to the morality you were spoon-fed. They respond to conviction, not confession, and that's what makes them so confronting. They force you to own your choices, to state your desires plainly, to ask for what you want without apology. There's no hiding behind social norms in ritual space. You either stand in your power or you don't, and that demand for authenticity is what makes the demonic path so feared and so liberating, because it's not just about spirits. It's about seeing how much of your life has been shaped by inherited morality. How many times you've bitten your tongue, downplayed your ambition, ignored your intuition because you didn't want to be seen as selfish, arrogant, or rebellious. But those same qualities reframed through the demonic lens become strengths. They become tools for transformation, not because demons offer you shortcuts to power, but because they challenge you to stop waiting for permission to be powerful. The inverted moral code is a wake-up call. It asks, what if everything you've been told to fear is actually a doorway to your own evolution? What if the traits you've suppressed are the keys to your purpose? What if the line between good and evil isn't fixed, but drawn and redrawn by those who fear what you might become? This doesn't mean morality is meaningless. It means morality is contextual. It means you have to be brave enough to define it for yourself, to ask whether the rules you live by serve your growth or someone else's control. And that kind of questioning is exactly what the demonic worldview demands, not blind rebellion but conscious disobedience, not destruction for its own sake but transformation with intent. And when you start living by your own code, something happens. You begin to see rituals everywhere, and not just in occult practice, but in daily life, in the routines you follow, in the beliefs you uphold, in the roles you play without even thinking. And that leads us to something far more powerful than summoning a spirit. It leads to summoning yourself through action, through repetition, through ritual. Because in the end, belief isn't just a thought, it's a force. And when harnessed correctly, it changes everything. Ritual is more than ceremony. It's the engine of reality. We like to think we're rational modern beings, detached from the superstitions of our ancestors. But watch how we behave, how we repeat patterns, how we attach meaning to objects, gestures, and words. And you'll see that we're still bound by ritual. We've just replaced incense with branding, temples with corporations, robes with uniforms. But the mechanics remain the same. Repetition creates belief, and belief, when acted upon consistently, begins to shape the world around us. In demonology, this isn't just philosophy, it's law. Ritual is the method by which the unseen becomes real. Thought becomes matter, symbol becomes substance. When an occultist performs a ritual to summon or communicate with a demonic force, they aren't just going through the motions. They're layering meaning, intention, energy, and action to open a pathway. The candle isn't just a light source, it's a beacon. The circle isn't just chalk on the floor, it's a boundary. The incantation isn't just words, it's vibration. Every part of the ritual, when aligned properly, isn't performance. It's participation in a deeper logic, a symbolic system that speaks to the subconscious and beyond. And here's the part most people miss. It's not the ritual itself that holds power, it's the will behind it. The ritual is the amplifier, the will is the signal, but ritual isn't confined to the occult, it's everywhere. Think of national anthems, hand over heart, flags raised, voices unified in a chant. That's a ritual. Think of how corporations launch product slogans, repeated phrases, public unveilings, ceremonial product drops. That's a ritual. The morning routine, the Sunday sermon, the political debate, even your daily coffee. It's all ritual. If it's charged with meaning and repetition and the same laws apply, belief plus intention plus action equals reality. The occultist just doesn't pretend otherwise. What demonology reveals is that reality is far more malleable than we're taught. That the rules of this world aren't fixed but programmable through ritual and focus. This is why symbols matter, why gestures matter, why the shape of a sigil, the timing of a chant, the direction of a movement all matter. They are not arbitrary. They are signals in a larger energetic system like code in software. Get the code right and the system responds. This is also why repetition is such a powerful tool, not just in summoning but in social control. Repetition breeds familiarity. Familiarity breeds belief, and belief, when reinforced by emotion and ritual, becomes the filter through which we perceive reality. If you're told from childhood that a certain figure is evil, and that message is repeated through books, films, holidays, and warnings, it becomes a reality in your mind. The ritual of repetition has written it into your subconscious. You will act as if it's true, even if you've never questioned why. This is how propaganda works, how religion works, how advertising works. The occult simply puts a spotlight on it and says, use it consciously. In the demonic tradition, this process is inverted. You don't wait for belief to be handed to you. You build it through ritual. You declare your intent. You shape your own narrative. And the more you act in alignment with that intent, the more real it becomes. Not because you've convinced the universe, but because you've programmed your own mind to respond differently. You've changed the lens so the picture shifts. This is what terrifies those who cling to rigid structures, because someone who understands the mechanics of ritual doesn't need permission. They don't wait to be initiated by society. They initiate themselves. They don't worship symbols. They wield them. And that's what demonology at its core is about. Self-directed transformation through intentional action. The magician isn't pretending when they light the candle or draw the circle. They're aligning. They're speaking a language older than words, and whether or not a demon appears in visible form, something always answers. Sometimes it's a shift in perception. Sometimes it's a surge of energy. Sometimes it's a dream, a synchronicity, an opportunity. But the response is real because the intent was real. And in that moment, ritual stops being a performance and becomes a force, a shaping tool, a form of reality engineering. This is why those who walk the path of demonology rarely return to conventional thinking. Because once you realize that belief can shape form, that ritual can reprogram reality, and that symbols can summon power, you stop living passively. You stop waiting. You start acting with purpose, with precision, with presence. Because reality isn't fixed, it's responsive. And once you learn to speak its language, you're no longer a spectator. You become a creator. There's a cost to waking up, not in theory, in practice. Because once you see the structure behind the illusion, you don't get to unsee it. You start to notice the repetition in everything. The way news cycles feed fear. The way advertising feeds desire. The way systems feed obedience. And suddenly, it's not just the occult that feels structured. It's your entire life. But the real discomfort doesn't come from discovering demons. It comes from discovering how much of your reality was constructed to keep you small, compliant, and asleep. Once you begin to truly understand demonology, not as horror fiction, but as a spiritual system, you start seeing that it's never been about monsters. It's about mechanics. It's about the precise way energy moves when it's directed with intention, about how belief, when reinforced through ritual and symbol, alters outcomes. That's not just magic, that's psychology. That's neuroscience. That's the subconscious. The demons aren't hiding in the shadows. They're embedded in patterns, in unchecked emotions, in inherited fears, in the rituals we perform every day without questioning why. There's an eerie clarity that comes when you recognize how many of your thoughts aren't yours. You were taught what to fear, what to want, what to chase, what to avoid, and most of it was never chosen. It was passed down, repeated, enforced until it became yours by default. You begin to realize that programming isn't just digital. It's spiritual, and it starts early. You were conditioned to fit into a system long before you ever had a chance to question it. Demonology doesn't create that awareness. It amplifies it. Because when you study forces that demand clarity of will, precision of thought, and ownership of consequence, you can no longer pretend to live unconsciously. The blindfold slips. And with that awareness comes discomfort, because it's easier to believe the world is random, that things just happen, that your struggles are bad luck or divine punishment. But the demonic worldview doesn't allow that comfort. It suggests that your reality is shaped partly by systems, partly by your own unconscious consent, that you are a participant in the very structure you feel trapped inside. And that hits deep because it means the cage isn't just external, it's internal. But here's where the shift happens. Once you recognize that you've been playing by rules you never agreed to, you can stop. Not all at once, not perfectly, but consky. Ausly, you can choose which rituals you continue, which beliefs you discard, which fears you investigate instead of obey. That's the first act of resistance. Not screaming into the void, but quietly, deliberately reclaiming authorship over your own mind. And yes, it will cost you. Awakening always does. You'll feel the tension between who you were and who you're becoming. You'll lose people who prefer the programmed version of you. You'll feel isolated at times because clarity often comes before connection. But that space, the discomfort, is sacred. It's the space between the old pattern and the new path, between the unconscious ritual and the intentional act. Demonology doesn't offer comfort, it offers clarity. It doesn't promise light, it promises sight. And in that vision, you'll see parts of yourself you were taught to fear. Your desire, your ambition, your anger, your power. But these aren't flaws, they're tools. Tools that were buried beneath shame and called evil because they could not be controlled. You're not being called to worship demons. You're being called to stop worshiping your limits. Because once you awaken to the system, whether that system is spiritual, societal, or psychological, you stop being a product of it. You begin to see how every story, every image, every ritual has been shaping you, nudging you, steering you, and you start to ask questions that unravel the whole design. Who does this belief benefit? Who profits from my guilt? What would happen if I reclaimed my intent? These questions aren't philosophical. They're liberational, and they lead somewhere dangerous, to the edge of the program, to the space where the rituals of control no longer hold, where the sigils lose power unless you give it to them, where the pacts break the moment you no longer agree to the terms. That's what real awakening is. Not knowledge, but choice. Not rebellion for its own sake, but the realization that your path was never meant to be inherited. It was meant to be forged. But the moment you choose to forge your own path, the system can't hold you the same way. You become a glitch in its design, a wild card in a game that depends on predictability. And that's when you become truly powerful, not because you've mastered the occult, but because you've mastered yourself. Once you see the mechanisms, the temptation is to burn everything down, to reject the symbols, the rituals, the system step away from all of it and declare yourself free. But that too is a trap, because walking away without understanding doesn't make you sovereign. It just makes you reactionary. The real path isn't about rejecting ritual. It's about reclaiming it, rewriting it, making it serve your intent, not someone else's. Because stepping outside the circle isn't about denial. It's about design. It's about choosing what stays and what no longer belongs in your reality. Freedom isn't found in chaos. It's found in conscious structure. Magician doesn't discard the circle. They draw it deliberately. They know the edges. They know the tools. And most importantly, they know why they're doing it. That's the shift from programming to power, from passivity to participation. The question is no longer what does the world want from me, but what am I here to create? And in that question, you begin to re-enter the symbolic world, not as a pawn, but as a player. You start to choose your language carefully. You pay attention to the media you consume. You question the holidays you celebrate, the phrases you repeat, the values you uphold. And every time you replace blind repetition with deliberate reflection, you're breaking a spell, a small one maybe. But spells are broken in layers. You peel one back, then another, and over time you realize that you don't need to destroy the system. You just need to stop feeding it. But don't mistake this path for ease. Once you take authorship of your beliefs and rituals, you lose the comfort of blaming others. And make no mistake, it is a profound comfort. The world provides an endless supply of villains for your story. The system, your parents, your boss, the government, the unseen forces you were told to fear. Blaming them is easy. It gives your pain a face. It builds alliances with other victims. It absolves you of the grueling work of looking inward. This narrative is a cage with comfortable, padded walls, and most people will live and die in it without ever realizing they hold the key. But when you claim authorship, you step out of that cage. There's no more "they made me." There's only "I chose this," or "I allowed this," or "I will change this." That level of radical responsibility is heavy at first. It feels like standing alone in a storm, with no one to point to, no excuse to cling to. It means every thought, every habit, every word, every passive agreement is laid bare for examination. Suddenly, your life is no longer a series of events happening to you. It's a series of creations originating from you. In that moment, you stop being a reaction. You become an origin point. This is the abyss. This is the great filter on the path to sovereignty, and it is where many, perhaps most, turn back. They turn back not because some great demonic force pulls them in, but because freedom is a discipline and servitude is a habit. The system they just escaped whispers seductively, promising the return of comfort. It says, "This is too hard. The weight is too much. Come back inside. It's warm in here. Just blame them again. It feels better." Freedom demands constant consistency. It demands a presence so sharp that it cuts through the fog of your own conditioning. It demands the daily, hourly choice to align your actions with your deeper intent. That doesn't mean perfection. The pursuit of perfection is just another trap, another program designed to make you fail. It means persistence. You will stumble. You will fall back into old, comfortable habits, the mindless scrolling that numbs your anxiety, the familiar anger that makes you feel powerful, the gossip that makes you feel included. The old programming runs deep, but now you'll notice. And that awareness, that simple act of noticing your own relapse without judgment, changes everything. That awareness is the crack in the matrix of your conditioning. It creates space, a sacred pause between the trigger and the response. In that space, choice is reborn. Before, the trigger would fire and the old program would run automatically. Now the trigger fires, you notice, and in that millisecond of awareness, you can choose a different path. You can breathe instead of reacting. You can observe the anger instead of becoming it. You can put the phone down and step away from the algorithm's pull. In that space, you are no longer a slave to your impulses. You are the one who decides which impulse is worthy of action. This is where your rituals change. They are no longer about summoning something external, but about reinforcing this internal choice, this new alignment. They might become terrifyingly simple. They are the deliberate actions you take to reclaim your energy from the systems that feed on it. Your ritual might be the first 5 minutes of your morning. Instead of reaching for your phone and letting the world's chaos, outrage, and advertisements become the first thing you consume, you choose silence. You sit, you breathe, and you ask yourself one question: what is my intent for this day? You claim the beginning of your day before the world can claim you. That is a ritual of sovereignty. Your ritual might be the way you speak. You notice the habit of complaining or blaming, and you consciously choose to speak from a place of ownership. Instead of saying, "You make me so angry," you learn to say, "When this happens, I feel anger." You are no longer projecting your power outward. You are owning your internal state. Speaking your truth, even when your voice trembles, becomes a devotional act. Your ritual might be how you consume, not just food, but information. You make a conscious choice to turn off the news, to unfollow the accounts that thrive on your fear and outrage. You recognize that your attention is your most sacred currency, and you stop giving it away for free to those who drain it. You choose to read a book that expands your mind, or listen to music that elevates your spirit. This is not escapism. It is energetic hygiene. It is guarding the gates of your mind. Your ritual might be the simple act of lighting a candle with intent, not with a long incantation, but with a clear, silent focus. As you strike the match, you decide what this flame represents: clarity, courage, the burning away of an old belief. It's no longer just a candle. It's an anchor for your will, a physical manifestation of an internal shift. It's a reminder, glowing in the darkness, that you are the one in control here. These are not performances for an unseen audience. They are for you. They are the mechanisms by which you ground your mind, direct your will, and remind your spirit who is steering. This is the real work. It is the slow, patient, and persistent act of rewriting your own code, one conscious choice at a time. This is where demonology ceases to be a study of spirits and becomes the art of self-mastery. Journaling your thoughts before sleep, speaking truth even when it trembles. They don't need to look occult. They need to be real, because the ritual isn't for the world. It's for you to ground your mind, to direct your will, to remind your spirit who's steering. And this is where demonology, strangely enough, becomes empowering. Not because it hands you power, but because it shows you the structure. It teaches you the rules of engagement, that nothing answers without invitation, that no force binds without your consent, that even the darkest entities play by law. You are never powerless. You just forgot the terms of the agreement, so now you get to rewrite them, and you're not alone in hat process. There are others waking up, others remembering, others questioning the same old symbols and choosing new ones. And while the journey inward is always personal, the resistance is collective, because the system thrives in isolation. It depends on you believing no one else sees what you see, but we see you, and we're building something different quietly, steadily, with intention. A network of individuals not waiting to be saved, but choosing to become sovereign. Stepping outside the circle doesn't mean you stop engaging with the world. It means you engage on your terms. It means you take back your attention, your voice, your energy, and you use it to shape something that reflects who you actually are. Not the version of you the system prefers, not the role they wrote for you, but the self you're still uncovering layer by layer, breath by breath. You're not escaping reality. You're redesigning your place within it. That is the true ritual. The daily ceremony of self-sovereignty, the act of remembering your own name, your own symbols, your own rules. And when you live from that place, the system no longer works on you the same way. It sees you, but it can't move you. There comes a point in every journey where the myths fall away, where the symbols stop being abstract and start becoming mirrors. And what you see staring back isn't some ancient force or supernatural entity. It's you, your will, your fear, your desire. That's the hidden truth demonology forces you to face. It was never just about spirits. It was never just about summoning. It was about power, the kind that starts within and echoes outward, the kind that's been buried beneath years of programming, guilt, and conditioned helplessness. The system convinced you that power was out there, owned by others, locked behind degrees, titles, rituals you weren't allowed to perform. But that was the lie, the real secret. You were the ritual all along. You've seen how structure governs the unseen, how demons don't operate through chaos but through contracts, how symbols and language shape not just belief but perception, and how every system you were born into mimics the same logic: control through repetition, loyalty through fear, identity through illusion. But once you see it, really see it, the game shifts. You stop being a spectator. You stop being a servant. You start becoming a sovereign. That doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes honest, and from that honesty, clarity emerges. You see the cost of your decisions. You see the weight of your words. You begin to craft your days with intent. That's the work. Not casting spells in secret corners, but waking up and living as though your attention is sacred, because it is. It always was. Every force, every system, every entity that has ever sought to control you has done so by first seeking your attention, your belief, your focus. Take that back and you take everything back. This isn't about becoming fearless. It's about acting in spite of fear. walking your path even when it shakes, defining your values, standing in your truth. That's ritual, that's magic, that's power. And as you continue this path, you'll find the same question returning again and again. What am I aligning with? Not what am I afraid of? Not what am I running from, but what am I choosing to channel, embody, build? Because this journey isn't about escaping darkness. It's about integrating it, owning your shadow, not as a shameful secret, but as the source of your depth. That's what demonology reveals. Not a world of monsters, but a map of the human psyche, rich with energy you were taught to fear. But not anymore. Now you see, now you choose. And if you've come this far, know that the journey doesn't end here. There's more we haven't said, more that can't be said, at least not here. That's why Insights Academy exists. Sign up through the link below to go deeper. Receive exclusive knowledge we can't publish publicly, and get your free copy of the Kibbelinly available for a limited time. You were never meant to live by someone else's script. Not spiritually, not emotionally, not mentally. This world has always belonged to those willing to see through the illusion and shape reality from the inside out. And now that the veil has lifted, it's your turn. Your turn to write the story, to draw the sigil, to declare your truth, not with borrowed language, but with the full force of who you are. No longer bound, no longer waiting. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting. I understood it.